between the governments in Ottawa who work for the rich without being concerned about other Canadians. We have concrete solutions, and I'm looking forward to presenting those solutions.
Hey. So Quebec is different, and we're proud of recognizing that. So we're not, that's something that we're very proud of. What we're proposing is two things. One is a requirement that any project that goes through Quebec would have to go through Quebec's evaluation environmentally. Secondly, we want to make sure that we're committing that if there is not if there's not communities on board on the acceptabilité sociale,
if there's no social acceptability.
What we said in general, though, we wouldn't impose pipelines on any province. We recognize we still have the power to do so. We've got the federal jurisdiction and the constitutional powers for national projects, but I don't believe it's the appropriate way to move ahead because it hasn't been successful in the past. It hasn't worked. And what I believe is we need to make sure that we're putting forward ideas that are in line with the vision of what communities want. And we can encourage things that will help us reduce emissions. We can use incentives to do that, but we have to make sure we do the work first instead of just imposing things. Well, a project like Trans Mountain, I've been very clear, is a project that I don't think should go ahead. For a number of reasons, it's been challenged at the court level because of the lack of proper consultation and respect of Indigenous nations. For that reason, it fails. On the environmental front, it failed in court because they did not consider the impact to the environment. There's still ongoing concerns that have not been addressed. So for that project very specifically fails for a whole host of reasons. But in general, what I would do is 3 criteria. Look at the environmental impact, if all the environmental concerns are addressed, as well as does it fit within our plan to reduce emissions. Secondly, does it respect Indigenous communities? If it does so, that's another criteria that's satisfied. And thirdly, does it create jobs in Canada? If it's just about exporting a raw resource without adding value, without creating jobs, it's not a project that I would support. But if it satisfies these criteria, that's a project I'd look at. That's not the language I've used. I want to be very clear. I've said it would be Quebec's ability to have an evaluation and to ensure that Quebec is not going to have a project imposed on it. I would make sure we go ahead in a way that respects Quebec and that would not impose a project on Quebec. Sure. Yeah, I'm going to be definitely working with my team on tonight's debate. I'm excited for tonight. I love French. I love the language, and I'm really excited to hold the Prime Minister to account and really to show Canadians that they don't have to settle for less. Mr. Trudeau is going to scare people into settling for less. I don't think they have to. In fact, I'm confident we as a country can do a lot better, and people deserve a lot better. And that's why we're going to put forward some real solutions to the problems people are faced with. The big difference is that if we want to solve some of the major problems that people are worried about here in Quebec, we can't do it unless we work together. And what the Bloc is not able to do and doesn't even want to do is work with others. We can work with the rest of Canada, bring people together and solve problems. Like the climate crisis, that's one where we need to work together across Canada. It can't just be solved in Quebec. It needs people from Quebec and from the rest of Canada working together. Oui, donc...
Yes, the big difference between ourselves and the Bloc and the Conservatives and other parties is that on issues that matter to Quebecers, We need to work together, and the Bloc can't do that and doesn't want to work with the rest of Canada. And if we really want to reduce our emissions, if we want to address the inequalities that exist in our society, we must work together.
The rest of Canada, the Bloc doesn't want to, nor do they care to work with the rest of Canada. They believe in just playing defense for Quebec. But Quebecers want more than just that. They want to tackle the climate crisis, and that's going to require working together with all of Canada to reduce emissions, working together with all of Canada to transition to a clean economy. You can't just do that working in one province. It requires working together and doing things like building an east-west energy grid to reduce the emissions of Canada, to connect clean energy in jurisdictions that have a lot of it with jurisdictions that don't. There's so much that we can do when we work together, but the Bloc is not prepared to or doesn't really want to do that. Well,
there are a lot of things we can do together if we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. For example, I want to build an energy connection between the provinces where there is a lot of clean energy available and those that don't have any. That's something we can do if we're ready to work together, but the Bloc doesn't want to and cannot work with the rest of Canada.
Hi, Morgan. Sure, this election is about who's in it for you, who's fighting for you. And I put it to Canadians, if you look over the past number of years, the Conservatives and Liberals haven't really been working for people. They've been working for those at the very top. They've been making life easier for the wealthiest corporations, billionaires and millionaires, but they haven't made life better for Canadians. In fact, they made it harder for Canadians, and people are paying the price. And so there's some clear examples. Mr. Trudeau gave away $14 billion to the wealthiest corporations in last year's fall economic statement just to buy corporate jets, but he let families that are struggling to find affordable housing or for their medications out to dry. That's the difference. We will not give away billions to billionaires. We would actually invest in people, and that means things like universal pharmacare, investing in affordable housing, and that's what I want to put to Canadians. And I'm confident when they look at the choices they have and look at who's in it for them, they'll see that New Democrats have always been and will always be in it for them. No, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about what people are going through and how we can make sure we improve their lives by doing things differently. And instead of benefiting the powerful, let's benefit Canadians. Let's benefit Quebecers. Let's benefit working families. That's what we can do. Parce que, en fait, le fait que j'ai un turban, c'est clair que j'ai un turban.
You know, I mean, it's clear that I have a turban,
je suis un amoureux de la langue
but I
française.
love the French language, and I understand the importance of identity. I am someone who can fight for you, and it's clear with other governments in Ottawa, both Liberals and Conservatives, they have always wanted to only help the most powerful members of society, multi-millionaires, for example, instead of workers. And what I'm saying is that I'm in favor of same-sex marriage, abortion, dying with dignity, and the other parties simply don't have the same values and don't share the same values with Quebecers. Well, in fact, I think it's clear that right across Canada, there are people who have some bias. I have seen that in my own life, and I've had to fight against prejudice. But I'm happy to do that because I know that if we can do that, we can move forward.
Sure. Yeah. I've faced that my whole life. I grew up in Windsor and Toronto and St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador, and we've got beautiful communities that are welcoming and loving. But in all those communities, there's also been systemic racism that's existed across Canada. So there's always been challenges for people based on who they are. And I am not a stranger to that. I face prejudice myself, but many Canadians do. And I'm confident, though, that if we go past those prejudices, that we can actually find so much that we have in common, and we can build a better Canada where we focus on how we solve problems as opposed to our differences. I would say my main opponent is cynicism, because a lot of Canadians feel let down by Mr. Trudeau. They feel that they had a lot of hope and a lot of excitement about things that were offered, and then a lot of promises were broken, and people now don't really feel that same hope and that excitement about voting. And I want to tackle that. I want to replace that cynicism with hope and tell Canadians that, you know, you do not have to settle for less. You don't have to be voting out of fear. You can vote for something you believe in, and that's, I think, my biggest opponent. Yep. Yeah, yeah. I think it's important to challenge it, and I'm hoping that by being in Quebec and saying, hey, listen, I got a turban and a beard, and I'm out here talking about loving the language, fighting against climate crisis, investing in people, investing in universal medication for all, that people can see, you know what, maybe it isn't a good idea to have divisive laws that discriminate people based on the way they look. Maybe we should focus on how we can build a better society together. And my presence in Quebec is a way of saying, hey, there's a better way to work together. We can actually work together and not discriminate based on the way we look. And on the court challenge, there is a court challenge going on right now, and I don't want to politically interfere with that. And I think it's very important that that court challenge go ahead. I support the right to have that court challenge, and I don't want in any way jeopardize its success or its outcome by interfering. Well, when there's an existing or ongoing court challenge, it's important for that court challenge to be able to continue without any sort of political interference if it's in process, if it's happening right now. Laws should be designed to ensure that rights are protected and that there's a court system that can challenge laws that are discriminatory. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And so we need to see the process go ahead. Oui, il s'excusait.
Yes, he apologized, and I think that was a good thing. He also said something I fully agree with. He said we have to go beyond an apology and move into concrete action. And I fully agree with that, because Mr. Trudeau apologized a lot. But he didn't take any concrete action to address the situation, and that's exactly what is needed. Yes, an apology was needed, but we need more than that, and that means that we also need concrete action to ensure that this type of discrimination cannot continue in future.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Merci.